and welcome back to A Chapter a Day.
Keeps the devil away.
I'm Pastor Pleck, that is Pastor Holland, and we are talking Acts chapter 27. We're going to outline it, observe it, interpret it, and apply it so you can take Jesus along with you along your way. Now, we start off in Acts 27, 1 through 8, where the voyage begins. Paul and the other prisoners are handed over to the centurion Julius. They board the ship at Adramyttium and sail along the Asian coast, and they stop at Sidon. Paul visits friends. They pass Cyprus. They transfer to the Alexandrian ship at Myra, and then they struggle against the winds at Fair Havens near Lycia and Crete. But then in verse 9 through 12, Paul warns them, don't go on. You don't need to keep going. But they're ignored. Then in verses 13 through 20, the storm strikes and the gentle wind lures them out, but the violent northeaster hits, and then the ship is driven helplessly. And then it's all not looking good. After days without sun or stars, all hope is abandoned. Then in verses 21 through 26, Paul gets encouragement from God. Amid hunger, Paul reminds them of his warning because he has to let them know that he was right, which I appreciate. And then he also says, don't worry, take courage. An angel showed up to me and we're all going to be saved. Then in verses 27 through 32, they near land, and then Paul lets everyone know that they need to they're gonna hit the rocks. It's okay. The sailors attempt to flee, but Paul says, don't let anyone leave. And then in verses 33 to 38, Paul says, listen, all 276 people need to eat, and because it's been 14 days of this crazy suspense. And he says there will be no harm, just the only thing that's to be lost is the ship. Then after giving thanks, breaking bread, they eat, and then they lighten the load by dumping the wheat. Then in verse 39 through 44, the actual shipwreck. At dawn, they spot a bay, and they attempt to beach the ship. Strikes a reef, bow sticks, the stern breaks. Soldiers plan to kill prisoners to prevent escape, but the centurion spares them all on account of Paul and orders them to swim or float ashore, and all reach land safely. Whew. That was a lot. So what observations did you make, Holland?
Man, it's just a very detailed account of this voyage. Like, you get the direction the wind is blowing. You get all the, stops, the locations they arrive at, how long they stayed. I think it's fascinating. Luke is the one who wrote the book of Acts. Yep. And he's speaking, though, as someone who was with Paul on this journey. And so, one of the 276 persons is Luke.
Yeah, right? He remembers this event. And so many times in here, you say, and like verse 29, and fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 acres in the stern and prayed for day to come.
Yeah. So Luke is on there with him, and he's taking notes, writing down all this stuff, understanding that he's going to be publishing this account of what happens. And you get tremendous detail about this very long and dangerous journey to Rome, which I think is awesome. It's like, how have they not made a movie about this yet?
Yeah. How exactly? This is the original Castaway, but I guess, it has 276.
I mean, like, look at the verse 40. They cast off the anchors, they loosened the ropes, tied the rudders, hoisting the foresail to the wind. They made for the beach. I'm just like, this is like such a cool story and like so detailed. It's awesome. It's not, again, Luke's purpose is not just, let me teach you, let me give you the theological and moral teachings.
I'm ready for the streaming show Paul in Acts.
There you go.
All right. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of these guys. Paul has incredible leadership for being a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
And partly, I think leadership comes from confidence, and his confidence is in the Lord, and the Lord talks to him. So if the Lord shows up and says, hey, don't worry about it, the whole ship's going to break up, you guys are going to be fine. It turns into an adventure like going to the same amount of confidence you would have at a amusement park ride is what you could have if the Lord says you're going to live through this.
Yeah, right. Like, he's like, okay, cool, let's see what happens. Yeah. I know we're going to make it through. I don't know how. Yeah.
And so that must, when he starts talking, that amount of confidence had to have come off in his voice.
Yeah. And that's just an interesting point too, that leadership is not, always is not the same thing as like authority. Like, he did not have authority in terms of some office or position or rank or anything. He's a prisoner, right? He's on the lowest rung. But he had influence. He had leadership and influence because of his confidence, because of and he was right. He proves to them, he's like, hey, I told you guys, you should have listened to me. And so, the second time around, they start to listen to him, right?
Yeah. And that's the part, is that like, hey, thanks, Paul, for reminding us how right you were. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut, or the broken clock's right twice a day. But clearly he was, he knew of God. And so therefore he's like, hey, you didn't listen to me the first time. Listen to me now. I promise I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. What about Julius the centurion? What an interesting character. He shows like initial kindness and respect toward Paul in verse 3. And then he prioritizes practical advice over the spiritual insight in verse 11 when they just, follow the winds.
Yep.
And then verse 43, he has a desire to save Paul, influence his decision that preserves all the lives. Like he is, I think he's one of the guys that goes, Paul was right. I should have listened.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's awesome. I also love just that we get another angel visit here, right? Paul, this whole way through Acts, he's been like, God's been speaking to him through angels, dreams, visions. It's awesome just how much God led Paul through this whole journey. Yeah, and you got to appreciate, if your life is going to be like one of suffering, then, it's just a courtesy by Jesus to hook him up with some more visions than most people. Okay, here's another one. There's a lot of stuff in here about like ships and voyages and stuff that Luke just says, but he doesn't explain. Yeah. Like he just kind of expects that people who are going to read this know what he's talking about. Like what's a northeaster? Yeah, he talks about the northeaster. He talks about, where is it? The fathoms. Where does he mention how many fathoms it is? Yeah, it's a sounding. Right? Like he's like, it was 20, that's how deep it is, right? Yeah. Oh, so a fathom is like, I think it's a unit of measurement. It's like 6 feet or something like that. Fathoms, verse 28. There we go. They took a sounding and found 20 fathoms. Okay, there it is. How would it's 120 feet. Here's what I don't understand. And maybe this is just like, how would you take a sounding without radar? Yeah. Like what are they doing here? They're taking. This is where I don't know enough about ships but he doesn't explain. That's kind of my point. Is I'm like, man, he's just like, yeah, we took a sounding. We were this many fathoms. A little further on, we took a sounding again, and like everyone reading this is just like, got it. And I'm just like, man, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, we need to do better at our nautical understanding, right? Of the world. Okay. What about the sailors? I just kind of thought these guys are taking desperate measures. They're like fear, self-interest, let's kill everybody, let's throw everything overboard. They also want to secretly escape the boat. Yeah. And Paul has to tell, hey, listen, everyone's about trying to escape. You need to stop them. Yeah. Isn't that wild? And they go, 14 days without They eating? Go 14 days without food. Sailors are hardcore. Yeah. Yes. This whole thing is just, I don't know. It's such a epic masculine story of hardcore guys out at sea, trying to survive, trying to lead, trying to deal with the elements. And it's a cool story. Yeah. Okay. Let's get into some of the nature of man. All right. How about, humans often prioritize pragmatism over spiritual wisdom. Yeah. Now granted, if you just met Paul, you don't know that he has got a direct line to Jesus. But maybe you should have known that. Yeah, right. And so, it makes sense. Hey, there's no wind. Doesn't look like a storm's coming now. And then the spiritual, man of God guy prophesizes that you're about to, lose the ship. At what point do you go, I'm going to take your word for it? Yeah, right. Or just the nature of man that it's expected that we are, use reason and wisdom, and right. You see them trying to work out what to do here at each point, how long to stay, where to go. So just the intellect and reasoning of man is seen here. Yeah, that's good. How about everybody in a crisis? They go to despair, self-preservation, murderous. Yeah. I just want to save my prisoners. Get out of here. Yeah, I want to save myself. Because if they didn't kill the prisoners, then wouldn't they be held accountable if somebody escaped? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what verse 42 says. Lest any should swim away and escape, and then it's on them. Right. which we already knew from chapter 16, the Philippian jailer, right? He was going to take his own life.
Because the prisoners were about to escape.
Yeah, you also see the necessity of men to be strong, right?
Nice.
You don't get Paul sailing to Rome without hardcore sailors and soldiers and stuff like that. People who are able to build great ships and, lead them across the sea. Paul doesn't make it to Rome otherwise.
Nice. How about just the frailty of man? The voyagers are helpless against the wind and the sea.
Yeah, and the frailty of man, but the strongest men still don't even compare to.
These guys are just. I mean, these are ripped. They can go 14 days without food. They are enduring the harshest of experience, and yet they are at the mercy of God. When it comes to their little ship in the big ocean, no matter how big it is, it's still tiny.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay, well, so on that, I think it leads to God, and
God.
Remember in the Gospels, Jesus could say to the wind and the waves, "Peace, be still," and they'll stop. You know, and so you see the power of God, the bigness of the sea and the shipwreck, the frailty of humanity also points to the power of God here.
I love that. Okay, what about God? Just the simple sovereignty. I know this comes out in almost every chapter. Sovereignty of God.
Hammer at home.
Yeah, God will make sure Paul gets to Rome. Don't you worry. He promised Paul he would get there. He reminds Paul he's going to get there. And even though there's this crazy shipwreck, Paul's going to get there.
Yeah. God is a comforter. He sends the angel to Paul, and the angel's first words, "Do not be afraid."
Hey,
right?
nice.
God is an encourager and a comforter.
Now, do you think he's saying don't be afraid because he's freaked out about the ship, or don't be afraid because he's freaked out because he saw an angel?
Maybe a little bit of both. Yeah. Usually, angels almost always start off whatever they're going to say with "Don't be afraid."
Right? Yeah.
Fear not.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me sometimes I'll walk in the house and my wife doesn't know I'm there, and then I'll come into the room and she goes, "Wah! Why didn't you say you were here?" I think that might be "Hey, don't be afraid."
Yeah, there you go. All
right, how about God is worship worthy, and he always how about he's worship worthy and people come to him in crisis. Because I love how Paul goes, I belong to God, to whom I belong and whom I worship. And then the angelic message affirms the grace of God working through Paul.
Right. Yeah. I also, I love, again, the message and the mission that he's on. You must stand before Caesar. And, again, this reveals about God that he is worthy to be worshiped by all, including kings and rulers of all nations, and most powerful person in the world right now, Caesar, right?
Yep. You will know.
God is saying, you're going to know that I'm the true king.
Okay, I love that. Let's get to applications. Sin to avoid or confess, a promise to claim, an example to follow, a command to obey, and knowledge to believe. What about for sin? Avoid ignoring godly wisdom in favor of worldly advice on majority pressure.
Yeah, okay. I like it.
Do you think that was sin, though? I guess if the apostle says something that God said, then I guess it's sin.
Yeah. That's tough. I'm I think they should have listened to Paul there. I'm hesitant to call it a sin,
okay.
But and just in that moment. But I know what you mean. When we read Paul's words, we need to listen to Paul.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think command to obey, do not be afraid from the angel. That's the most frequently repeated command in the Bible, right?
Don't be afraid.
I read somewhere one time it's repeated 365 times, one for every day of the year. I've never fact checked that, so maybe you can fact check it right now. But I think 365 times in the Bible, fear not, or some form of that.
That would be amazing if that's true. I'm
fact checking right now.
You're gonna get some. Okay, hold on. A popular claim circulates often on social media that "do not be afraid" appears 365 times in the Bible, one for each day of the year. This is a myth and not accurate.
No! Dang, how many
Fear
times
not
is it?
appears 60 to 71 times in the KJV, but fewer in modern translations like the ESV or NIV. Do not be afraid appears 33 to 70 times. 70 in NIV, 33 to 48 in ESV or NKJV, depending on the exact search. Do not fear around 35 to 55 times. So
It's in there a lot.
combined variations, if you want to go with all, it goes to 100 and 150 times.
Wow, that's not even close to 365.
In the ESV, it's about 100, 110, nowhere near 365. The myth persists because
We have busted the myth right here
We are
on Chapter a Day.
we're busting myths.
Okay, well, now you know it's not it's not once per day of the year, but it's in there a lot, and one of them's right here in this chapter. So, still a command to obey. Don't be afraid.
Way to go. All right.
110 days out of the year.
How about an example of follow Paul's example of bold encouragement and faith sharing in the midst of a crisis.
Yeah. And example to follow Paul's leadership, just someone needed to stand up and give a word of encouragement. They're tired, they're hungry, they're fearful. And for Paul to stand up and say, hey, don't be afraid. Don't worry, guys. God's got this. That's a great example to follow as well.
God's got my back. All right. That sounds good. What about knowledge to believe? That God's grace goes beyond what we deserved. Like Paul, God could have just saved Paul. He didn't have to say the 276, but to sort of further validate Paul and the ministry saving nature of God, he uses Paul's fervor and God can do it and saves 276 people off a complete disaster shipwreck. And I think that's pretty wild.
There you go. Love that. Example to follow. Understand nautical.
Be a man. Know what a fathom is.
Learn what a fathom is. Learn about ships and wind and anchors and stuff.
And learn how to navigate by the stars, because clearly they were just if they just had the stars, they would have been fine.
That. Yeah.
Oh, well. All right. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on A Chapter a Day.